Fertility Season 3. Today, I'm so excited. We have on Alexis with us, which is so crazy. She was on in Season 2. So I'm going to stop everyone right here. If you have not listened to her episode, please go back to Season 2 so you can kind of get like how it all started and now what led her to like this point. And so then you can kind of hear like the part 2 of everything that's been going on. So definitely go back and listen Season 2. But we are so excited for have you on here for Season 3 and just to get to kind of hear what happened next in your life. So welcome. Thank you, Alexis.
Yes, thank you so much for having me back. I always love. I'm like a lot can change in a year, so
Oh,
happy to be
yeah,
back.
so much. And we haven't really been ever to do this with anyone. Like, I feel like people
Fun.
always want to know what happens next and like just to follow up and like hopefully hear like the happily ever after. And, everyone is like gets invested. So
Yeah,
I'm so excited that you're on. Okay, so
yeah,
the last thing I remember from how it ended from like Season 2 was that you adopted your 3 embryos, right?
correct.
You had
Yes,
moved them to your clinic and
yes,
then you were like prepping for a transfer.
correct. Yes, that's
Okay, so
exactly
if
it.
you want to kind of just like start from that and then share whatever you want to share.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, last I talked to y'all, I won't go obviously through our history. Like Amanda said, if you want to hear my backstory, you can go listen, because it's very long. But we did adopt 3 embryos, found a family just on a Facebook matching page. And is that how did y'all find your,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah,
that's the same
yep.
page, yes.
Yeah, same
Uh,
one. Yep.
Yes. And so anyways, found them and they ended up being they're local. So they're like 30 minutes from us. If that. So anyways, we did our first transfer last December. So I guess it was around the time I talked to y'all or we recorded last year. So we did that transfer and it actually ended in a miscarriage. I guess it was an early miscarriage. So probably we went in, there was a sac, but we never actually saw a heartbeat.
Mm,
So
I'm so
they,
sorry.
thank you. Yeah. They had told us, you can take, she wanted me to take the medication, and I don't even remember. That seems like that was literally ages ago. So I don't even remember what it was. But you can take this medication. Um, and I, after talking to so many people, just told her no. I wasn't going to do that. I either, wanted to just let my body naturally try to process that. And if it didn't, then we could talk options. So, um, she, I don't know that she was completely on board for that, but I just told her I wasn't doing it. So, um, we gave my body a couple of weeks and it did just do what it was supposed to do. And I wouldn't change that. If someone were to ask me my advice on how to deal with a miscarriage out of those options, I would 100% say let your body do, if it can, do what
Yeah.
it's supposed to do. So anyways, went through that and then that was in January, I would say mid-January. Um, and then we took a break. I just needed a reset for sure. So, for till, gosh, probably, I guess May. Yeah, we just didn't do anything. So we just took time off. Um,
And I'm
and
sure
then we did.
also, not to cut you off, but I remember you talking about like how important like 3 was for you. And so I'm sure also just mourning like those like 3 children that you probably, because I know for me, like I like have planned out this whole life of like
Yes.
these are embryos, these are my children. Like we have 3 kids because we adopted 3 as well.
Yeah.
So like I'm like, we have 3 children, like that is it. So now after having that miscarriage, I'm sure it's like another like it's a loss in itself of those 3 kids.
Yes. It was really difficult. I think, right, like everything else, it's just everything is its own kind of hard. So for me, the miscarriage was definitely its own kind of hard. It's, you're grieving lots of things, but um I really, I don't know. So my numbers, initially my number was fine, but then we were tracking the numbers and they just didn't. I kind of knew in my heart like what it was supposed to be doing, right? But of course, a part of you is still hopeful. And so, and we actually found out about that transfer the day before Christmas. So
Oh,
it was really sweet that it actually worked and we got to celebrate Christmas and tell my family and all of that. And then obviously, just didn't turn out the way we hoped for and prayed for. But yeah, I just knew they had told me I could jump back into another transfer. And I've always been like that, especially in this journey. Like, and I talked a lot about that in the last episode that I'm someone who has to process things before moving on. And so I just told them, I'll let you know when we're ready, when we're not ready. So um anyway, so then, yeah, in May we did the second one and it worked again, which I won't lie, I was actually pretty surprised. I was convinced that it did not work. And I don't know if yeah, I don't know if that was because really statistically they're untested. So if you have three untested embryo, like to work back to back to back, it's just like not really that heard of. So I was just like, this one didn't work. I mean, I was convinced. And so with the first one, I did not test. I know a lot of people do, but I was like, I'm not going to test. I'm just going to wait till they call me.
good for you. I could not.
This the second one, I didn't test either, but on the day that I was supposed to go in to see if it worked, I was like, actually the night before, I was like, I'm going to take a test and stick it in. I'm very big in like reading my Bible every morning and having this routine. So I stuck it in my Bible, but I was like, I'm not going to read it. And talk about discipline. So I did that the night before. And then the morning of, I was supposed to go in. I took another test and then I opened it up and read it and saw what verse, like I just stuck it in the Bible and saw what verse it was in and or at. And so that was really cool. It was a verse. It was Lamentations 3:25 was the verse. But anyways, and so then it said it was very obvious that it was positive. So and then
Wait,
I
I
went in.
love that so much. That is so
Yeah.
sweet.
So then I went in and obviously, I knew it worked. But as the rest of my life has been, or the last 5, 6 years, it's been a really rough road. So I had a lot of anxiety just because pregnancy after loss or pregnancy after infertility, right? You just hold a lot of anxiety. So I would say probably, gosh, I don't know. I had my numbers checked and they were really high. And so they were like, you don't need to come back in. We'll just do an ultrasound 2 weeks from now or whatever. But I ended up having some bleeding and I called and they were like, okay, well, it was a holiday weekend. And so the on call person, was like, we'll get you in on Monday or whatever. So went on Monday. Um, Everything was fine, but I had a sub, whatever those called, is
The
hematoma.
subchronic hemorrhage.
Yeah, yes,
Yeah.
hemorrhage. Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes. That's CH. So I had that, which of course is just, I think there's trauma there, like because when you see like bleeding or whatever, it automatically brings you back to the miscarriage. So
Mhm.
that was really hard for me, and that continued on. That was probably it was early, so that was probably week 6 or 7, and that continued on to week, I would say 13. Um, so they were seeing me a lot, and because of that, but everything ended up being fine. I actually started seeing a counselor that she was faith based, but she specialized in infertility and pregnancy after loss and postpartum, and that was just the best thing for me because I was like, I'm gonna look back and not have enjoyed any of this because I'm gonna have been so ridden with anxiety. And like what a gift it is. I've been waiting for this for so long. And so um from I would say weeks 13 to the anatomy scan, I really just felt like peace, which was it was just a God thing because I had not felt that.
That's
Um
huge. I mean, especially after going through infertility, going through loss and everything,
100.
to have peace during a pregnancy. I feel like so many women can relate. Obviously, our listeners right now can relate to
Yeah.
being so fearful. And it sucks because it really does like rob the joy out of it when it is something we've been praying and wishing and doing everything we possibly can for years to get. Then you get to this point and you're actually pregnant, and then all you are is scared.
Yes,
And
exactly.
rightfully so. I get it. I was petrified. I literally
Right.
thought I was going to lose my child the entire pregnancy.
Yeah.
But to
Yeah.
literally get to that point of having peace, and I think the therapist part is like so huge. And I'm so glad you're saying that, because I think that's something that more people probably should be doing, is seeking
Yes.
seeking counsel. Yeah.
A huge advocate for it. And I talked a lot about the support group that I led in the last podcast, and I still led that. It was still part of it, even being pregnant. I still was leading that. But I needed someone. This phase was different for me because I had poured into people for so long, and I needed someone to pour into me. And so that was really helpful for me. So, anyways, we went to uh Lake Tahoe. We went on a trip right before the anatomy scan. I had planned it on the due date of the baby we lost, and to try to make a tradition of doing something every year, going somewhere. Um, got back and had the anatomy scan, and I don't know. I just something in me was like, which is probably everyone, right? But I was like, I just feel like something they're gonna find something. I didn't know what it was. I just felt like something was kind of off. So we go in. Um, of course, the ultrasound tech can't tell you anything, right? But I'm asking her along. I'm like, does everything look? Yeah, yeah, everything looks great. And then she said, okay, so I'm kind of having trouble finding the umbilical cord. And I'm like, I don't think that's right. Um, she's like, okay, I found it. It took her a minute. So I just felt like something was off. So we go, we meet with my OB, and she's like, the baby looks great, but I'm seeing, and then she just starts spouting off these things that I honestly just kind of went into another world. Um, she said, you have a VCI, which is a developmental cord insertion, which essentially means that the cord does not connect where it normally does. Okay, well, I had heard this like scrolling TikTok or something. Literally. But so I'm like, okay, well, that's can honestly that can affect baby's growth. So you can have like IUGR with that. So I'm like, okay, whatever. So she keeps talking, and she's like, but the other thing is you have what's called vasa previa, I think. Now she didn't 100% know because honestly, ultrasound techs aren't supposed to be able to really find. It's really hard to find. So she's like, that's what my ultrasound tech thinks she's finding, but I'm not 100% sure. And we're like, what is that? Because pretty much everyone's heard of placenta previa,
Yeah.
but um, if you say vasa previa, no one's heard of it unless they've had it. And so it's essentially what it is when the baby's vessels run over your cervix. So instead of like just baby's vessels connecting where they normally would, when you have vasa previa, the way our MFM described it was your baby essentially chose to go like through the woods to grandmother's house, like not a straight shot. And that's essentially if you draw a picture, which they did for us, it goes all the way
Like,
around.
yeah.
Yes. Um, so she was like, I want to get you in with the maternal fetal medicine, like right now. And of course, I'm bawling because I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't even know what it is. I haven't Googled it. I just know it's not good because she's like, you need to see the maternal fetal medicine. So, um, the maternal fetal medicine and my OB, I raved about her on the last episode. If you're in the DFW area, I'll rave about her again. She's literally an angel. She got us in, so we went across the hall to maternal fetal medicine, and he was like, "You definitely have vasa previa, and you are on bed rest as of today." And I'm like, "Well, what is like
Wait,
bed?"
what?
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's like, "No, you like aren't doing anything. You're going home. You're staying literally in the bed or on the couch. You're doing nothing." So of course, that's like so
Yeah.
much of the process. I mean, that day will forever, there's lots of days that will forever be stand out to me. But I, yeah, just literally was like feeling like I was in someone else's body. Like,
Is
what?
your husband with you?
Yes,
Okay.
thank the
I was like,
Lord.
oh my gosh, yeah.
Yes. So we came home, and of course, lots of processing. I immediately, because if anyone follows me, people know I'm very open. So I immediately posted about it and connected with other women who had it. Got on a Facebook page for Vasa Previa. There's about 3,500 women in it worldwide. Um, and because I think there's like a 0 or like 0.5% chance of having it. It is more common with IVF. Um, just in general, right? I think like IVF increases odds of lots of things. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, because we were like, what is there a reasoning? And he's like, no, we don't know the reasoning. There's really no reasoning. It's just happens sometimes, but it is more common with IVF. So they sent me home, and he's like, I want to see you every Wednesday. Well, that lasted. So I went home. We ended up having a gender reveal because we didn't know the gender yet. And
Oh,
so we did get to do a gender reveal because I was like, I don't know how much I'm going to get to do. The plan was for me to be hospitalized at 28 weeks
oh my gosh. And then just until when? Just like,
till you have the baby. So they don't let you go past 34 at the very latest when you have this, because the risk is if you were to go into labor or have a bleed, those are his vessels that would bleed out.
so that's why, sorry, I'm asking a lot of questions, but
Oh, I think it's very informative because who knows, there might be someone out there. I
I'm
actually
sure.
so many women on Instagram who follow me, and I'm like, oh, how'd you find me? And they're like, typed in vasa previa.
Yeah, no, which is incredible because especially like you said, like you didn't know anyone who else has had this until you reached
Right.
out into this community. And I think it's
Yeah.
amazing that you're talking about this. Okay, so the reason they wanted you to be on bed rest is because if you were like walking around doing everyday life, it's like a higher chance for like a bleed or
Yes. Yes.
okay,
Yeah. And I was a nanny, so obviously that
picking up
went on.
kids and doing
Yeah.
all the, yeah.
I mean,
Okay.
it's a miracle, honestly, because we had just flown. I mean, we had just gotten back the day before
Yeah.
um, from that trip. We were doing so many things. So, like, I would not have been able. Yeah, it was really a miracle. So, um, we had my gender reveal. I was at home for 2 weeks, and then I had a bleed. It was a Sunday around lunch, and it wasn't like a bleed, like a miscarriage bleed. It was like a very tiny bleed, but they had told me if you see any at all, you rush to the emergency room. Like there's no time for anything else. So, and my hospital, my OB is an MFM, all of them, my infertility doctor. we live in kind of like a suburb of DFW. So they're about 45 minutes away with no traffic. Um, so anyways, we rushed there. They admitted me to, because I was 22 weeks. They admitted me to labor and delivery. My OB and MFM were both on call. Again, another God thing. Um, and they did all the tests. She literally did every test under the sun and couldn't find a thing. So they admitted me for a night, and I literally cried, I think, for 24 hours straight
Oh,
because I did not know, I didn't know what was going to happen. And she wanted to give me a round of steroids, which again, I know that means, okay, we're prepping for the baby to come soon. My hospital here considers a baby life, like they will try to save them at 22 weeks. But honestly, majority of hospitals will not.
yeah.
So that's another thing I am a huge advocate for now. I'm like, if you're pregnant, um, look into that at your hospital because a lot of them are 24 weeks. So they would not have done anything if that was the case. So um anyway, so I got a round of steroids 24 hours later, got the next round, and then it was up to my OB, and she told me I could go, but they wanted to see me 24 hours later. So, like, you can go home for a night and come back. So I did, came back, and went to my OB. She went over everything. She said, I'm ultimately leaving it up to the maternal fetal medicine doctor. Went across the hall to the maternal fetal medicine. He says, I can't tell you what to do. I can't make you do anything. But ultimately, if you were my daughter, I would tell you you need to be admitted. And I'm like, me and Chris, my husband, are like, okay, when?
Yeah.
Like, and he's like now. And we're like now, now? And he's like, yep,
Like go
right
there
now.
right now to the hospital.
Yep, like I'm gonna call up there. And he said, I'll send you back over your OB and you can go over all the things with her. But ultimately, it is your decision. So we went back to her. Her office had already closed. It's like 5 something. And she sat and I'm just crying hysterically. And she sat, and she held my hand and she hugged me and she said, I can't make you do anything. But I'm telling you right now that if you go back home and something happens, not only is your baby's life in danger, your life is in danger. So I felt like in that moment, it's like I didn't want to be there. Like I could cry right now talking about like I didn't want to stay. That was the absolute last thing that I wanted to do. But I felt like there was no other option. It's like, when someone tells you like essentially you're choosing whether your baby's going to live or die and you as well, I had to be like, okay, I'll stay. And so she
And this
said,
you
I'll
worked
let
22 weeks, right? You said 22
yes,
weeks. Oh,
yes. So she said, I'll let you go home. I said, is there any way, and this might sound so stupid to people, but like my dogs are my babies. They were my original babies, but literally went through everything with me, and so I was just like, wait, I'm going to be admitted now till I have a baby and like stuck in a room. And it's just like all these things that you're trying to process. And so she was like, I'll let you go home for 2 hours. That's how long you get. So that means you go home, you pack a bag, and you come back. And
mm.
that's it. And
Whatever
so
you
that's
gotta
what we
do. Yeah.
yeah. So we came home. I told my dogs bye. I
Oh,
I had a tub, like a plastic tub with some stuff in it, because we knew that this could happen, at some point. We knew at 28 weeks that it probably would, 28 to 30, but probably 28. but I really didn't have that much packed. I mean, I just had some stuff thrown in there. So we packed up that stuff, and on that day in September, I got admitted um to the antepartum unit, which I didn't even know was a thing.
Yeah, wait, what is it? What's it called?
It's called antepartum,
Okay.
and I know all about it
I
now.
heard that.
It is basically a unit where they keep women who are pregnant and are going to be there for a while. Now, it might only be 2 or 3 days, it might be 2 or 3 weeks. On the occasion, it might be 2 or 3 months, but that's pretty rare. So that's where I got admitted, and I was in a room literally. Um, the next door was the labor and delivery doors. So,
Oh
and I
my
had a pink slip. She wanted me that close. And I had a pink slip, which essentially meant if anything happens, we have 3 minutes to get this baby out.
God.
So
Crap.
yeah, it was a lot. I still like even now being through, and I'll get through everything else I went through. And like that, and knowing that I was about to be there for I don't know how long was the hardest thing I've ever done. Because you're stuck in a room, and for
Yeah.
the first few weeks she wouldn't let me go out of the room. So I was stuck in there, and you think about like within four walls, and I didn't know how I was going to make it through. So I had to be in the mindset of like not, oh my gosh, I'm going to be, what if I'm in here till Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas? There were all these things, right? Because my due date wasn't till January 25th, but they had said my MFM wanted 32 weeks, my OB wanted 34 if we could make it. So um, those dates were around very end of November and December 13th. So, anyways, all that to say, I had to change my mindset to like, I'm in here another day to he's made it another day because
Mm.
we were having a boy. So, um, that is how I got through every day. There were several things that I did. I had a friend set up a visitor train 100%. I think that helped me make it through where people signed up and they came to visit me. It was filled. I think I went a couple of days, a handful of days without seeing someone.
Oh,
Um, and
that's
that's it. So,
so
uh,
sweet.
yeah, so that I ended up, I think God used that time as a ministry. Honestly, me and my mom made goodie bags because with HIPAA, they can't give my information out. And I was like, do people not make friends up here? Like, I'm a very social person. And they're like, well, after COVID, we didn't start stuff back. And so we made goodie bags and put stuff in them. And then I had the nurses pass them out to everyone on the floor. And then I
Oh,
wrote a card in there and wrote my name and my number, told a little bit about my story, and if they wanted to connect, to reach out. So I ended up connecting to 4 girls on the floor.
stop. You're the cutest human. I can't. That's so sweet.
Yes,
I
and
will make friends here.
yes, and it was amazing. One was only there for 2 weeks. One was there for three before she ended up having her baby. I mean, the stories though that you connect with people again, right? It's like when you're going through infertility, you want to connect with people going through fertility. When you're going through miscarriage, miscarriage. When you're going through pregnancy after loss, pregnancy. This to me was the exact same. I was like, I know that these girls in here want to connect to someone. It's not everyone's jam, but I only got 4 girls back. And I think that they would range from having 10 to 15 on the unit at a time. Um, but the 4 girls I connected with were still very much in touch. A couple of us had like NICU babies at the same time. So, um, anyways, so there were lots of things I did to survive that 3 months. Halloween came and went, and then Thanksgiving came and went, and I was having 2 ultrasounds a week, um, with the MFM just right across the hall. I would just walk across the hall. I got privileges. I was like looking out the window one day and I was like, wonder if this is what jail feels like.
Oh my gosh, stop. I mean, yeah, kind of, I'm sure. If you're like stuck in that room and you can't get out.
My husband's like, "You're so dramatic." I was, but I'm really not.
Like there's
um,
doors on the window.
yeah, and so, anyways, I finally got privileges to go outside. Um, and my
That's
parents would
amazing.
come. Yes, they would come and they would wheel me in my wheelchair. My family is 100% like the best, hands down. So my husband, because we had a couple of scares. So like, and there are lots of details that I won't get into, but like they picked up contractions at one point, so they put me on medicine. And at that point, I got a lot of anxiety because I was like, what if something happens and they have 3 minutes to get me into the our room and no one's here? Like I'm by myself. And so at that point, that was 26 weeks, I believe, 27. Um, my husband started staying half the week, and then my parents were coming every weekend, and my mom would stay the rest of the week. I essentially
Your
moved in.
husband, sorry, is your husband like having to like go to work and like work during this
Yes.
time? Yeah.
Yeah. So he was working. Thankfully, he did work. He works downtown Dallas, so which is where I was. Um, but we got like memory foam mattresses for the couch, and then I had one for my bed. I mean, I moved in
I mean, you
essentially because
literally did. You brought your pillow,
yeah,
I'm sure. Like, yeah.
oh, all kinds of things. I told him I was going to write a survival book and leave it there for him to pass on to other girls who have to stay there. Um,
That's so
and so yeah, so they started staying with me then, and in the process of all this, they diagnosed me with gestational diabetes at 24 weeks.
just
Um,
hit you with another thing at this point. Like,
yeah,
what?
all the things. Which so you're stuck in a hospital, right? So it's not like you can cheat. I mean, you're stuck with hospital food,
Yeah.
and you're having to prick your finger after every meal. But after a little while, couple weeks, all my levels were perfectly fine. And so my OB and MFM just went back and forth on a lot of things. But my OB finally got the MFM to just let me prick my finger once in the morning for fasting. Um, so that, and then they also diagnosed me. So I had short cervix. So that was another concern when I'd gone in for my anatomy scan and went to the MFM. He's like, your cervix is really short. So we don't know if I always had short cervix or if this was something that I'm kind of convinced that that was a thing already. We just didn't know because
And
I
what
was
does like a short cervix do? Can you explain
so
that?
essentially, yeah, so if you've heard of like a cerclage, like a lot of people will get, a lot of women have gotten cerclages for short cervix, but mine wasn't. It's essentially like, when the baby comes out, you have a vaginal delivery, um, your cervix shortens. So that's essentially what it is. So they needed to measure it constantly. So every time I had an ultrasound, the twice a week in the hospital, they were the things I were looking for were my cervix length, um, fluid, because water breaking, and then they were checking the vasa previa because they could see in there, with the bleed or whatever. So those were things I were looking for. They also diagnosed me with so it's gestational diabetes, short cervix, and then gestational hypertension. This did not show up until the last, I would say, 2 weeks before I had him, which essentially is what they call it before it turns into preeclampsia.
Goodness.
Um, so I had all that going on, and they had picked up contractions once, which they thought were probably Braxton Hicks, but with given my situation, they treated it as not Braxton Hicks. So she started me on a medication and they stopped. And then 2 weeks later, they did the same, picked him up. She upped the medication, then they stopped. And then at 32 weeks and 2 days, um, she, my nurse, so I got to know my nurses really well, obviously. I
I'm
had
sure.
Yeah, they put me in charge with the charge nurses. So I had the same. 6 nurses probably the whole time I was there. And I did monitoring twice a day on the baby. And she picked up a dip in his heart rate. And so she was like, I want you to turn to your side so we can see if this is just like what's going on. Well, when she had me turn to my side, she picked up contractions and she was like, okay, these contractions are like 3 minutes apart. And I'm like, what?
You like feeling it though, or not really?
No, no, never felt a thing.
So
No.
crazy. Okay.
Yeah. So she's like, I'm going to call your OB. Again, this was a weekend. My OB happened to be on call and she comes down there and she's like looking over everything and she's looking at my ultrasound from the day before and she's like, we could have 5 different people in here, 5 different doctors, and they would probably say 5 different things. Like, there's nothing on here that's saying like you're gonna have a baby. You're not bleeding, your water's not broken. But she was like looking at your ultrasound from yesterday, your cervix looks a little shorter, and your gestational hypertension, your blood pressure, you know, it's not horrible. So the medicine that actually had me on for contractions also lowered your blood pressure. So, fun fact. Um, so she's like, it's not horrible, but I don't know. Like, I'm getting this gut feeling that we should deliver today.
Oh my
And,
gosh. Were you like,
and we're
what?
like, I'd actually had Chris come up there. I called him. I was like, they're picking up contractions. I'd feel better if you came up here. And
Yeah.
he's like, oh my gosh, we've done this twice before. I'm sure it's fine. My mom had stayed the night with me. She'd left, come back. They have a house here, actually, too, where we live, so like 45 minutes away. Come back, and I was like, nope, they don't need to come back. And so they all came back, and she's like, yeah, let me call the MFM, but I think that we need to deliver it. And we're like, when today? And of course I just start crying again. And she's like, because I'm like, he's not ready. Like, we had a date set for December 13th, which was supposed to be 34 weeks. And this was 32 and 2. And thankfully, she had given me my second round of steroids. Uh, you get 2 rounds, so 24 hours apart. But I had my first one 22 weeks. She gave me my second one. I had finished the last dose the day before. So she was like, he's had his steroids. Everything's gonna be fine. Like, I just feel like we need to do this. So about an hour later, they took me to labor and delivery. I ended up having to have a magnesium drip, not for preeclampsia, which if anybody has preeclampsia, they'll know what magnesium is. Uh, but she gave it to me more so for him and his brain development, his lungs. So I didn't have to be on it like the 24 hours after having him. It was 2 hours prior to having him. It was like 2 rounds or whatever of magnesium. And that is horrible, horrible.
Really? Wait, why?
I'd
I've
heard
heard of it.
people tell me it was awful, but honestly, I've never had the flu. Knock on wood. But that's what people say it's like. It's just your whole body feels like it's on fire, literally on fire. Like you cannot get
That's so
cold. Like I had
crazy.
fans. I was like, because I had a fan like in my room, and I was like, go get the fan. And you get really sick and have horrible headache. I mean, it just literally, I was just kind of out of it. Thankfully, um,
I'm so
I just
sorry.
yes, just had to have it the 2 hours. And so then we did the epidural because you have to have a C-section, obviously, with this. Um, so we did the epidural, and then they probably wheeled me. I probably went into labor and delivery around 2, and then at 5, I was going back to the OR room. Um, we had 2 IV ports on both of my arms because the bleeding out there's a very high risk of that with vasa previa. because of all the vessels. Because if you hit a vessel, then that's, you can bleed out. Um, and then they had blood on standby for him. And then, yeah, so we went back and he came out at 5:48
Mm.
and he was screaming. And I cannot tell you, like it still gives me chills because if you look back at my journal every day from the hospital stay, I prayed and prayed and prayed that he would come out kicking and screaming because he always kicked me and he wouldn't need breathing support, which is really unheard of for a 32-weeker. But he did. He came out and he did not need any breathing
Oh,
support.
I'm gonna cry. Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
stop.
And everyone is like, do you know like what
Here.
a miracle it is? And I'm like, yes, I do. And so they took him down. My husband went with him. We had toured the NICU. There's two different levels. We had toured both, obviously, because I was in there so long. And because I was admitted 22 weeks, they thought, I knew they thought he wasn't going to make it that far. But going back and talking to the nurses after I had him, because I got to go back to my room that I essentially moved into, and talking to all the nurses and the doctors, and they're like, yeah, we thought he was going to come when you were admitted 22 weeks, we were fighting to get him to 24. That's what they thought. They had a NICU doctor uh, come talk to me when I was admitted at 22 weeks. Like, these are the chances of, I can't tell you what he said because I was like, I know that these are the statistics, but I just felt like God was going to bring him to, I just felt like everything was going to be okay, as scared as I was. Um, and so, anyways, and that's a whole other story. We name all our embryos, by the way, which I highly suggest. But he was our birdie. That was his name. And so because this was our fifth treatment and God created birds on the fifth day and my husband had maybe a bird's nest for Mother's Day as an action of faith. And then on the day that we went in to see a heartbeat, if he had a heartbeat after the bleed, um, there was a bird, a bluebird, to making a nest in the birdhouse that my husband had
Stop
made
it.
me. And so he will forever be, that was his name. That's what we called him. He was Birdie.
Oh my gosh, okay. I'm literally crying. It's fine. Oh my gosh, so sweet.
So, anyways, I felt like, because I would always sit on the back porch and read my Bible, and the day of the transfer, that's all I could hear were birds. And I told my husband that on the way to the transfer. I was like, all I heard. And he was like, this is our fifth treatment. Anyways, I say all that to say I just felt like from the beginning that like God was going to make a way for this baby. It wasn't going to be easy, but that like he was making this baby to be like a world changer. Like I don't know how else to explain it. Like I just knew. And so when they sent the NICU doctor and they were talking to me, I can't tell you anything you said because I was like, I know these are the statistics, but we're just not accepting that. Like, and so anyways, when he came out screaming and didn't need breathing assistance, I was like, no, I mean, I will always sing the praises of what God has done, but I know that God can do it. And so, anyways, he went to the NICU and he went to the first trauma level. Essentially, they're broken up into two, um, just because he was so young. And Chris went with him, and then I went to recovery, and then they wheeled me down to see him. Um, so the setup they have, they're the highest level NICU. Again, I didn't pick them because of any of this. It just worked out that way. And so I got to be wheeled down to see him. He was born 3 pounds, 14 ounces, um, and 17 inches long.
Oh,
And he was just perfect. I mean, he's perfect, head full of hair. And so, anyway, so yeah, well done. Got to see him. The next day, he was only there 12 hours before he got to move up to the next NICU unit, which essentially just like a feeder and grower is what they call it unit. And so then began our NICU journey. Um, So I literally say, I'm like, I literally can connect to someone on any level of anything.
Literally.
Because I had people tell me, NICU moms tell me that like the NICU was the hardest thing you will ever go through because you're leaving your baby, and it was definitely really hard. But I think for me, because I had walked through so much hard before, it wasn't easier by any means because it was very, very difficult. But I think that I had a different perspective on it. Um, because for me, I was like, he's here, like this, he's a miracle. We had people all over the world praying for him. And so I was like, as hard as this NICU stay is, like, he's here,
Yeah.
and so um he was in the NICU for 5.5 weeks. Um, Mainly just working on feeding because they don't know how to eat. And so um, they have to work on suck, breathe, swallow, doing that all at the same time. I'm like, people don't realize what all goes into because preemies are a whole different. And as a nanny for the last 15 years,
Yeah.
um, but preemies are just a whole different breed. And so we had a lot that we had to learn, just about like feeding him and just all kinds of things. So in order to leave the NICU, he had to have drink all 8 bottles. There's 8 feedings he takes in a day. He'd drink all of them. Um, and he had to have no like DSATs or Brady's in his breathing. Um, they have to pass a car seat test, and then they do a couple other things like a hearing test and all that. Um, so anyways, he got to come home 2 or 3 weeks ago. January 9th
Oh my
was when
gosh.
he got.
Wait, this is like so recent. This
Oh
is so
yeah. Yes.
okay, wait, when did you go home? Like,
So I went home. They kept me 5 days after my C-section. Um, and then I went home.
and then
And
how
then
long was he there without you being in the hospital?
so he was there 5 weeks.
Oh wow,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. So I went up there every day. My husband took off work for 2 weeks when he was born, and then a week after he came home. But um I would go up there every day. I would spend about I would go up there on 10 and I would stay. My husband would come after work and then we would both leave at like 7:38 at night. Um, and that definitely had its very challenging days for sure. And I was pumping to bring him my milk, but then you leave and I was like, I almost feel, and I told my counselor that I was like, I think my number one fear is feeling disconnected to him because he's somewhere that I'm not. And you wait for, in my case, almost 6 years. It would have been 6 years this October for this baby, and then you don't take them home with you. So, um, there was a lot to process in that too, and I probably still have not really processed that because you just go into this mode of like being a mom.
Yeah.
And so, um, anyways, but he did get to come home
Praise
January.
Jesus. Oh my goodness.
It's
Congratulations. It's so
Thank
amazing.
you. I know to have him here, I find myself just literally staring at him
Yeah.
because I'm like, I this last year has seemed like 10 years to me.
Oh, I mean, yeah, I
Um,
can even imagine, sure.
yes, it's been a journey. And so I used that time in the hospital. I had always wanted to write a book. Honestly, writing is how, aside from like community and prayer, like that's how I got through these last almost 6 years. And I'd always wanted to write a book. I had a blog, and so I started in the hospital. You really can't do a lot. There's only so much TV you can watch. And so I had created a routine for myself, which also helped implement in the NICU stay, just having a routine. And so, anyways, I used that time to write. And so I ended up, long story short, writing a devotional. And so I'm still working on the front cover.
Gosh.
But I'm going to publish it on Amazon. And my hope in that, because I also connected to several nonprofits for NICU people, NICU babies and things too. My hope in that is to go back to the antepartum unit, go back to the NICU, go to all these infertility women who've had in my group and give them this book, because it I write in there about all of it, about infertility, pregnancy after loss, miscarriage, antepartum. Um, it's going to be called To Those Who Wait, because aren't we always waiting for something? But and then the NICU, and then the very last one that I just wrote is about being a mom. So I'm praying that like everyone can relate, to that,
Really.
and realize they aren't alone, because every season can seem so isolating. And so I'm like, I want people to know that no matter what you're going through, like, you know, every season will have some kind of heart in it, but you aren't doing it alone. So
So
yeah,
incredible. Wait, so okay, you're publishing it on Amazon.
yes.
And so
I'm
when will
hoping,
we have like a estimated date? We think that that might be out.
well, yes, and I'm hoping the next few weeks. I don't know, by the
So
time this airs,
excited.
it should definitely be.
Okay, cool.
Um,
We will post all about it. You guys will be
yes,
able to, we'll have a link for you to purchase. This is incredible. This is so, so cool.
yes. I had to learn to turn. It really is. I mean, I've learned that it's about perspective. Like you have to learn to turn things, around and shift your perspective. And something that really, and I'm hoping that this will help someone who's listening. I love when people reached out to me or found me on Instagram after they listened to my episode last year. And so I'm like, something that really helped me, that I always said through infertility, was that sorrow and celebration can coexist. But I think what I learned through all of this year, and even now, because being a mom is hard, and I'm staying at home with them too. And I didn't never stay at home, a very social person. And so, and he's a preemie, he was the NICU, like we're not going anywhere. So I think something I also learned being in the hospital was, I was talking to a friend one day when I was stuck in there, and it was just a really hard day. And I was like, I don't want to complain. Like, I'm so grateful. I know firsthand, like, how hard it is to see people who are pregnant and be like, I would do anything. Like, why are you complaining?
Oh,
Because I'm in there,
yeah,
and I'm like, I
same.
know.
Yep.
And we were talking, and just talking about how, like, just in the same sense that sorrow and celebration can coexist, that gratitude and disappointment can coexist. And that is something that I carried with me the entire time. It's like, I am so grateful. But I can also be disappointed that this doesn't, I was robbed of a lot of things, right? I mean, I didn't get to have a baby shower, or, I mean, and that seems very minor, but like just everything,
Sure,
and
yeah, absolutely.
I think looking back, since this is like a fertility podcast, it's like in the same way, your whole infertility journey can look like that. Like you get robbed and stripped of a lot of things. And so just like giving yourself grace. And I used this analogy when I was on here the first time of like getting to the next destination, is you have to go down a windy road, and it's not the road you want to be. And so that's what I would say, like, yes, some roads are just a little more curvy than others when getting to your destination, right? But like 99% of the time, everyone you talk to is waiting on something.
Mm.
And so for me, this was like the most traumatic but rewarding like year of my life, right? I mean, there's so much trauma. I mean, don't talk to me about having another one anytime soon. And so I'm like, but those were things that I learned, is like, sorrow and celebration can coexist, and gratitude and disappointment can coexist. And um I think that if the second thing that I really learned was that if you are never content and find joy, like something is never going to bring you true joy. And I think that's what I learned, right? Because you can always find something wrong with something. Like there's always going to be a disappointment in this world. And so It's just really about finding joy in like Christ and for me, in this world, because ultimately there's always going to be other things that let you down. So anyways,
Oh
all
my
that to say, it has been quite the year. So
sure has. Well, you literally have explained your whole journey to us so beautifully. And I'm so happy for you that you now have your sweet baby boy. You guys are home. He's
yeah.
healthy. You are actually home. You're not in a temporary home in the hospital.
Yeah.
But everything though, I mean, all the wisdom you've shared, we're so grateful that you came on a second time to share this. I mean, it's obviously very traumatic. It's been a
Yeah.
whole long journey. So the fact
Yeah.
that you wanted to come on and even share that with us, we're so
And
appreciative of it.
his name is Sunny, by the way.
Oh, so
We named
cute.
him after like SUNNY. So it's got a lot of biblical meaning too, but he's definitely our sunshine after the storm. So
Absolutely.
it allows a great story when people are like, why'd you name him Sunny?
Yeah,
So
you're right. Sit
yes.
down. Let me tell you.
Actually, would you like to grab a cup of coffee? Because I don't know that we really have enough time for me to explain.
So funny. Okay, well, one last thing. You've given so
Yes.
much great advice. Like I said, so much wisdom you have truly. And I can't wait to share about your book. So hopefully it is out, especially when your episode comes out. I think it should be by then. So that's super
Yes.
exciting. We'll definitely post it for you and people will be able to purchase it. But for anyone that's listening that maybe either one just got like a diagnosis that like they potentially are going to have to be hospitalized or they literally were just told they have to go to the hospital. Do you have like any just like one or two things that you would like just tell them?
Um, yeah, so one thing definitely was taking it one day at a time. It's
Mhm.
funny because I talked about that on the first episode too, like how much of a control freak that I was. Very routine based control freak planner, just very type A. And God took that person and said, you aren't going to be her anymore. And I have completely changed. And I think what got helped get me through that was taking it one day at a time. Every single day being like, okay, this is, and that was something again with like Sunny's name. It's like they're weeping may endure for the night, but joy comes in the morning. And what else comes in the morning? The sun. And so every day I would be like, today is a new day, and just really taking it for what it is. Don't look past that day. And sometimes you can't look past 30 minutes from then, um and so that's one thing. Another thing would be community. I know a lot of people don't like to share their story. It's not everyone's thing, and I totally get that and respect that, but for me, I couldn't have made it without just relying on people. I think God's blessed me with the most amazing people. But even people I've met on Instagram, like I had women I had met who sent me um preemie clothes because they knew I was going to be in the NICU and just like things like that. And so I think my heart now is um to to be that person, to give back as well. And so um yeah, if anyone listens and wants to connect, I am always more than happy to do that. And
Can you share your Instagram with listeners so that they can be
yeah,
able to reach out to you?
it's Lex, just LEX_faith fitness fertility. So
Love it. Oh, well, Lex, it was so good having you on again. We so appreciate it. Like I said, we're gonna for sure we'll tag your Instagram, we'll tag the book, and any other resources you have. We'll make sure it's all on there. But oh my gosh, it was amazing chatting with you again as well. Like embryo adopted mom, like it's just I love
yes,
you every
I
time.
love it so much. I know I've been able to be a huge advocate for that as well through all this. So that's been really cool. But thank you all again for having me. As always, glad y'all weren't tired of me. And
Never. You're always welcome. No, we appreciate it so much. Thank you.